because it is a dye pigment fusion, if you happen to go through another color, you will transfer color onto your ink pad. You don't need to worry about it, because if you go in, you can wipe this color into your ink pad. Okay, so you can clean that off, so don't panic. But the idea behind this is you really don't want to go through another color because we're dealing with a dye and a pigment, all right? So what we're going to do with this, what's cool about Distress Oxides is that it's going to give us this incredible oxidized effect. The backgrounds are just ridiculous because we have this ability now to layer colors in a whole new way. And oxides can be used by themselves, and if you do that, you're going to get a much deeper oxidized look. Or you can still combine them with your Distress inks, which is what we've done in this tag. And this way you have a little bit more of that intense color of your dye and a little less oxidized finish of your oxide. Does that make sense? So if you really want an all over white, that's oxide. If you want color, that's going to be your dye. This is just going to be oxide to show you the effect. So I'm going to spray this with water because that's where oxides really kind of do their magic. I'm going to go ahead and place this down, do my first little print, and I'm going to dry this. Okay? Now as we dry this, we want to dry this because in order to layer color, you need to dry. If you want to blend, you would always do wet on wet. So here I'm adding a little bit of water just to kind of get some of that movement. Dry that a little bit. I'm going to go back into my inks. We're going to start layering this. Okay. So right now when I look at this, I'm like, that's a lot of green. I'll fix that. Same thing, add a little bit of water, get that to move around. You may look at this and go, oh, that's kind of distress. Well, wait till it dries, because when it dries, that's where you really see that oxide effect. And the oxide only happens when you wet it. When you just put it onto a surface, it doesn't really do much until you wet it. I'm going to add another layer and then I'll show you exactly what I mean. So now let's go in with some brighter colors. Let's take a little bit of warm lipstick and maybe we'll even take some spice marmalade, much of it. I'm going to add some water to this. I only add it to my craft sheet because I want to get movement. If I don't add water to this, it's just going to stop. And my students know already because I got to do it firsthand. They're kind of wow.
We did our homework.
That's it.
That's good.
The Ultra room didn't appreciate the mess, but hey.
That's right. That's right. We did this.
Immaterial. Well, yeah.
So
really.
here I was able to add spice marmalade right on top of that green. Again, something we could never do with ink, right? Would never show up. But because we have kind of a dye pigment fusion, the dyes are going into the surface, but the opacity of the pigment is sitting over the top. And you can see because I added water, it's starting to get that chalky, oxidized layer. It's really cool. Add a little bit more water there. I want to pick up a little bit more of that pink. Maybe we'll add a little bit more of that. And then I even think I want to add some more broken china to this. Break that up with a little bit of water. Just like you do with Distress inks, these are always going to react with water. So everything that you've ever done, if you like to play with your Distress and add ink and water and layer and blend, you can do that with the oxide. It's just the effect is going to be totally different. I had two tags. I think it was these two. Those are exactly the same colors.
Oh, cool.
Distress dye, Distress oxides. So it's really about the effect that it's going to give you. We have a little bit of that kind of opaque pigment. So let me go in, let me add that layer. See, look at that, I'm able to throw in some broken china over the top. So remember when it was all green, that was dye ink, you'd be like, all right, I better figure out something green. But now with the oxides, you always have that ability to go back and add another layer. So cool. And you'll see as this dries, you guys see that corner? Try not to move it in your video. See how it's starting to get that kind of hazy look? That's the beauty of oxide. Because if this was dye ink, it wouldn't be drying cloudy, it would be drying vibrant. And that's all about effect. And whether we're stamping with it, blending with it, doing backgrounds with it, even embossing with it, the ability of stamping on multiple surfaces is cool. And I'll show you that just on craft real quick. That's a good background.
How did you
I'm
decide?
ready to die cut something.
How did you decide what colors
I
to
close
pick?
my eyes and pick.
And do you plan to release the rest of them?
I wish, but you could ask Ranger. I hope so. I
Yeah,
tell
where's
everyone.
the salesperson?
Yeah, I tell everyone, like, ask Ranger. There are no plans yet, but I wish there are. But no, that's really how I've always chosen my palettes. Now that we have the palette of 60, even when I was doing sets, I grouped them by color. Like, I'll put all the pinks in one, you know, Spun Sugar, Picked Raspberry, Warm Lipstick, and I literally just reach in and pick one out. I do it by my markers. So they're in there, and I'm like, that's our pink.
Oh, okay.
How do you pick?
Yeah.
We take about 3 hours.
Right, how do you pick? So I like
That's how we pick.
That's how I do it. I've got pinks, reds, I break it all down,
One of
and I'm like,
each.
okay, I know that I want one of each of those, which one it is. And sometimes, am I a little disappointed? A little bit, but I don't change the game because I think it's meant to happen.
It's meant to be.
Yeah, because
Okay.
like I love Fired Brick, but would I really wanted the new Candied Apple? You bet I would. I really did.
Yeah,
And it
you're
was
right.
kind of, I mean, when I look at the mix, see, it's funny because no one ever asked me that question because they think I have it all figured out, but I don't. But if you think about it, in this, there was only a few of the new ones that kind of made the cut. You know, we had Wilted Violet, Cracked Pistachio. A lot of them were the older ones. We had Fossilized Amber that was new, but
Yeah.
a lot of them were the older ones. And what do you think, like, when you want all the new ones? I was rooting for them, but they didn't make it. Imagine Picked Raspberry in this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
But if
Candied
you start
Apple.
there,
Yeah.
you'll never pick your palette, right? If you change your,
I know.
you'll never pick it. I would be like, well, this looks good together. Ooh, this really looks good together. Yeah, that's how it was with the crayons. Like, how are you going to put them in sets? I'm like, no idea. But eventually, one will be left out, which was Blended Sage. Just by choice, just by look of the draw. Not a lucky one. Okay, so let's talk about stamping with this stuff. This is pretty cool because you do have the evolution of stamping with the oxide. Stamped, misted once or twice, misted 4 or 5 times, right? The more water you add, you're gonna get an oxidized effect. The more you saturate it, you're gonna get that dye to actually seep out and bleed out everywhere, which is pretty interesting. On a surface like Craft, if we take a stamped image, I'm just going to use, I'll use grid blocks for this. I don't need to use the platform. All right, I'm just going to add a little bit of color here. All right, so when we're stamping, remember our surface of our oxide is a felt pad, same surface as your Distress ink. So it's not going to be that squishy pigment ink. It's like, it's solid, you go for it. When we stamp on a surface, we have some really nice color, right? We have that nice pigment. We can dry it if we want to dry it. It can be dry. You don't have to use a heat tool, but you can dry it. But if we wet this, it becomes oxidized. So now you're going to see more of kind of that little, almost like a white layer kind of go to the top. And you'll see that as it dries, you've got like some white and some pink areas because it's oxidizing. We've got the white look of the oxide mixed with the dye color of the pink. So this is another great example of just stamped, sprayed. So you have the option. Do you always have to spray oxides? No. If you're looking for like, I love that Distress pigment ink and I just want to blend some pigment, go for it. Just blend it. But if you said, ooh, but I really want it to kind of look oxidized, great, wet it. And then it will do what it does. And the detail is pretty ridiculous. When you see it inside an open stamp like that, having the ability to do that is pretty unique, I think. And this swatch, you guys are welcome to look through it. This just shows all of the colors that we're releasing with its dye counterpart. Because I think that's important to really get a visual for Warm Lipstick Oxide, Distress ink. Right, same thing here. All right, great, but look at it oxidized.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Can't even
Look
handle
at
it.
Fossilized Amber.
Look at
Oh
that.
my goodness, look at that.
Look at that. Amber and marmalade. So it's very cool how good the effect. Look at peeled paint.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah, because the darker the color that happens in the palette, the more contrast you get with that oxidized layer. So, you know, you may not notice it as much when you're like, oh, pink is pink. But when you start getting into those darker colors, like even Ice Spruce, yeah, it creates a cool
wow.
effect. Broken China, it's interesting because it's got a lot of bright values, not that deep. But then when you go into, say, Faded Jeans, you really get that cool faded look. And then, of course, Wilted Violet, that was a great one. And then both of our browns. Well,
Look at that.
Yeah, you can't even handle that. And so all I did for this sample, literally just swiped it out and sprayed it. Because when you spray it, you actually see that dye separate. I'll show you. It's pretty There's no tricks. Someone's like, oh, your samples are so tricky. I'm like, what's tricky about it? Literally, like, okay, I'm making my swatches. Wow. See, I put a lot of time in my swatches. And then I just go in and just spray it. And I'll dry it. And I'll spray it again. And I'll dry it. Because you can see for every layer of water, you start seeing more dye seeping out.
Yeah.
And that's also what I like about a medium, that you get to control its effect. It's not something you put it on and give it a blast and all of a sudden, no, everything's going crazy. But you know what? I want more to happen. And every layer you do, it just becomes, that was that whole kind of stamp step that I showed you. You really get to control the effect of those oxides. You can even drip some on. Get some big drips. We can even go in there and make that edge move. We could even lift some of it off and go back down to more of the dye there. You just can't stop.
Yeah.
You
It's
just can't
addictive.
stop. It's good.
Yeah.
I'm super happy. Yeah.